In the last lesson on Ikigai, the key to everything, I asked you to place the reason for you waking up as the central power source in your life. I shared with you how my entire life changed when I uncovered the reason for my being as I wrote my book, Start With a Sparkle. That process initiated a change in me that culminated in crisscrossing the country selling my book in cafes, restaurants, bookstores, and beauty salons. I did that because I believed I was the one responsible for my book's success. I didn't leave it up to some agent or a publisher. I'm self-published, and I took it upon myself. The fact is that I was willing to fail miserably as long as I was doing what I love to do. I was completely unafraid to walk into each one of those venues, and I was deeply engrossed in my best life. I was having fun. I remember selling one book in LA, one book, and I still had the time of my life, and I had friends come and support me, and it was an amazing event. I never considered that I was failing. There was no failure in any of those visits. No matter how few or many books I sold, I never failed. What I did was I learned. And so one of the things that I did then that I'm now bringing to you is learning how to fail properly. So let's get started, shall we? Let's talk about failure because it's such an important aspect. The name of this lesson is Failure as a Habit. And one of the reasons why we have to start looking at failure as a habit is because we avoid failure like the plague. We think it's infectious like that scourge from the Middle Ages. And we don't want anything to do with it. We don't even want to be around anyone associated with it. And that kind of behavior is counterproductive to being a brazen creative. In fact, I want to attack society's notion of failure head on. And to do that, we're going to handle that in this lesson. It's going to be hard because failure and how we look at ourselves are so well ingrained. I mean, they're one and the same sometimes. In high school and grade school and college, we're taught failure is a stain. It's a mark on our character. We have to avoid it at all costs. We have to cover it up if we do have it as fast as possible. Failure is so ingrained in us from a young age that most of us don't even realize the power it has over our lives. For years, I've ridden a bike every day, about 5-10 miles, and I've had many times where I'm pedaling super hard and I just don't get any real momentum. I'll stop and look at the bike, sweating. What's wrong? The first thing I think of is I'm out of shape, or I've been pedaling all right, I'm in the wrong gear, and then I dismount and I lift the front or back wheel and spin the wheel a little bit, and next thing I know, the brake's rubbing on the wheel, slowing me down. And this kind of gentle but steady pressure is typical of how we see failure. We work super hard, we get ourselves all worked up, but we're not moving fast enough given the effort. In fact, the first thing we do is we look at ourselves. What's wrong with me? But like the brake rubbing on my tire when I'm riding the bike, failure as a character trait silently saps the energy out of our best efforts. By looking at ourselves first, often exclusively, we rob ourselves of the real reason for how we're doing, for how we're failing. And in my case, the brake's just not aligned properly to the wheel. If we could fix that, the wheel spins freely, I don't work so hard, and I can go a little bit faster. If we apply it in our endeavors, this definition of failure as a character flaw does the exact same thing, pushing us to avoid failure at all costs versus understanding why we should experience it and embrace it and then learn from it. If I keep looking at myself as the problem when I'm riding the bike and I'm pedaling harder and harder and not going faster and faster, and I don't stop and just look at the bike and see what's going on with it, I may miss the opportunity to learn from failure. We've been taught that failure is bad and that we're defined by it. When you get an F on a paper, you're bad. When something bad happens at work, it's your fault. When you spill milk in the kitchen, you're clumsy. We internalize this message over and over again, day after day. You remember what it's like from the key to everything, that our inputs affect our thoughts and our thoughts become beliefs when we practice them over time. So imagine you hear over and over again in your own thoughts from your family and friends, you're clumsy, you're a failure, you're stupid, you're weak. Eventually, those become granite beliefs. They become so well entrenched that we can't help but act in accordance with them. And so we accumulate all these little failures, all these little near misses and losses in our internal bank of me. And the ledger just piles up, magnifying loss after loss until we believe we are a failure, or far worse, we believe we will never be successful. And then the accounting in that little ledger in the bank of me gets really insidious. because it seems like we do start to win a little, like we start to have a little success, Now, never mind what scale we're using, right? We know that the old scale kind of still influences us. But based on that old scale, we start winning. And then the old version of failure shows up in stealth, matching the old scale, gnawing at us quietly, constantly. You don't deserve this beautiful person. You don't deserve this good job, this nice home. Failure disguises itself as doubt and begins to act just like that brake, ever so gently slowing us down, robbing our effort of its sharpness. We're working hard, harder than we should, but we're not making progress the way we think. We don't see the progress that reflects our sweat. And instead of getting off the bike and taking a look at what's wrong with it, we keep blaming ourselves for the lack of progress. We reinforce failure. And we keep thinking that it's a character trait, or worse, a character flaw. The problem with thinking this way is that we're taught to avoid failure first. We're taught that before you ever have any success, don't screw up. In the old way of thinking, they're mutually exclusive. You have failure and success. They exist in different universes, and it's a zero-sum game. You are either a failure or a success. You cannot have one without the other. And so we get caught up avoiding failure, thinking that if I just avoid failure, I'll be a success. But averting disaster is about as productive as you never want to be. Imagine if NASA just exclusively avoided failure. We'd have rockets that were too heavy to fly because they were explosion proof. The point of understanding this is that we're wired in the exact same way. Whether we admit it or not, we avoid failure and call it success. We even have little phrases, little cute phrases that we say to prove it. We say, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." Now, that's not what a blessing is. Not being in a position that's pitiful or worse, pitiable. That's not really success. Rather than avoid that terrible fate, right? Thank you, God, for not letting me have that failure over there. Year after year, we avoid failure till we're saddled with amplified mediocrity, and we're scared to admit it, so I'm going to say it for you. We think that avoiding failure over and over again is success. We've actually carefully crafted a version of avoiding failure by using someone else's scale of success in the first place. It's so easy to follow their definition of success and avoid all the things that are bad. Success and failure, they lie on this opposite ends of the spectrum, and it's really scary to talk about it, because good, success, bad, failure. The two never meet. Just as East never meets West. And we avoid one at all costs, and because we avoid failure and the two never exist at the same time, we believe we must be a success if we've avoided failure. Except, this is the funny part. Remember that taste we had in lesson 1? We had malaise, it just didn't feel right, didn't taste right. See, when we taught lesson 1, it was take me out of mediocrity, take me out of mediocre. My excellence demands ideas over carefully rehearsed excuses. That's a warning. When we feel that mediocre, it's a warning. Hey, you should be doing something different. Your ideas are more important than carefully rehearsed excuses. But we've avoided failure for so long that mediocre is so normal that those carefully rehearsed excuses become the only excuses we need. And then we never define success and pursue it on our own terms. I know that I was almost compulsively drawn to not failing. No, seriously, I was. Get this is for real. I used to think, I'm not in jail, so I'm not a criminal. I'm not on drugs, I'm not an addict. I got a good job, so I'm not broke. And I got a family, so I'm not single. Think about it. I had all these knots. And not one of them was, here's what I'm doing to live my best life. Nothing positive, nothing forthright, nothing effusive or effervescent about my life. All the knots. Not this, not this, not this, not this equals success. I was deeply entrenched in amplified mediocrity. I mean, I had that stuff into the waist. Are you kidding me? I was so deep in that amplified mediocrity, I couldn't even identify it was normal. I thought, what muck am I in? Muddy to my waist in amplified mediocrity. All of my carefully rehearsed excuses were powerful. I've got a family to feed. I've got kids to raise. I've got a wife to take care of. I've got a job, a career to take care of. I had these wonderfully elaborate, carefully rehearsed excuses that were absolute bunk. And here I am thinking, I'm a success. Mouth. Taste. So I'm going to ask you to think about failure in your own life, just like I did. Pause the video if you need to, and ask yourself if avoiding failure is the most common motivator for you. No, do it. Take a moment. I'll wait. It was an eye-opening admission when I questioned myself and I said, holy moly, I've been avoiding the knots my whole life. Not drugs, not this, not that, not cheated on my wife, not this. I did all these knots. I was so full of knots that success was easy. Look at what I'm not, I'd say. In Ikigai, the key to everything, I learned that habit determines outcome. And I learned what influences habit or actions repeated over time. And those are only in line with my beliefs. So my belief was that as long as I avoided failure, I'd be a success. Well, where did that come from? Let's go back in the key to everything and look at the thoughts. The thoughts were to be good, to be a success, I just have to avoid certain failures. And as I got back to the inputs, I can see throughout my life the key moments when it was okay for people to tell me not to do certain things. My mother would admonish me as I left home for a party in high school. She would say, keep your nose clean. Let me give that to you in a different language. Not get in trouble. She didn't say go out and find the girl of your dreams. She said, keep your nose clean. As a teenager, that's a great warning. Don't get me wrong. I think we need to keep our noses clean, but there was no comma. It was a period. It wasn't her fault because she was taught the same things that we all have taught. That the scale is avoid failure and you're a success. So here's the funny part about this. Once we identify that not failing is not success, what is success? Well, if you're a mathematician like I am, you begin to look at things with a different lens and you begin to say, not failure equals not success, failure equals success. Now we have this problem because we're taught do not fail or you will not succeed. Remember, we've been taught it's failure or success, bad or good. But I'm going to ask you to think of it in a different way. That failure is the only thing preventing you from success, so you have to go through it. You have to get comfortable with the thought that failure is normal. In fact, failure should be a habit. We know from the key to everything that a habit is an action repeated over time. So let's talk about the act of failing. When we fail, we should be learning. We should be stretching ourselves beyond the boundaries of what we consider normal. It shouldn't be easy to live a good life. It should be hard, but it shouldn't be hard because of sweat and toil. It should be hard because we're stretching boundaries of who we are and what we can do. Because we're always learning and growing and challenging ourselves to create more opportunity to express our Ikigai. It's okay to fall flat on your face when you have tried to express Ikigai in a new way because that's what your Ikigai says you should go do. We're not born with every skill set that will help us express Ikigai, so sometimes we're just gonna have to figure it out. And since there's no book, I'm not gonna teach you how to do it. You have to do it. I had to do it. And I had to fail miserably at it. I'm in LA, city of millions, trying to sell books that I've published myself. I'm in a bookstore. I sell one book to my buddy from the Air Force Academy who was kind enough to come hang out with me and buy a book so he could read it. He loved it, and I thank him for spending the time with me that day, but he was the only person who bought a book that day, and I'm in LA, Long Beach to be exact, in a bookstore, one book. Was that a failure? Absolutely. Miserable, abject failure. But instead of walking with my head held down, I walked out of there saying, I now know something I didn't know before. Every failure brings us a step closer to the success we seek when we define it on our terms. And the way we define success has to do with our ikigai. So when we fail, we bring it in line with the thought that we're on our way to success. And so we learn. So I taught my son the same thing I'm teaching here. Failure equals learning. In the next lesson called Tap the Gas Field, we're going to apply this very specifically, and it's going to be a beautiful exposition of how we can create the life we say we want. But first, we have to understand that failure is not an option. It is a requirement. It is a habit. Get used to being a failure. And instead of avoiding it, embrace it. Hold on to it. Stay warm with it. But learn from it. Learn why you failed. Learn why the attempt you made at success did not work the way you had planned. Figure it out and get past it and do it again. And fail again. And fail again. And multiple times fail. Every attempt helps us refine the process and get us closer to the point where we can express our ikigai the way we said would be a success. And when we focus on a process, we can understand that each time we fail, we get a little closer, a little closer, a little closer. And goals are so much more satisfying to pursue when we know that every attempt gets us a little closer to what we define as success. In fact, we start looking forward to attempts. We start looking forward to failing. What if you woke up today and instead of saying, I'm not a criminal, I am not a drug addict, I am not a bad father, you said, I am creative, I am amazingly brilliant, I am an asset to my family, I am a leader in my community. At work, I am an outstanding manager and leader. If you say these things the right way, then the failures that you have along the way encourage you to try again in new ways. And we'll talk about that in Tap the Gas Field. It's an amazing lesson. And the reason why it's amazing is because I had to figure out how to fail. I had to actually come to grips with the thought that failure is good, which meant I had to take a lifetime of learning and flip it upside down. And that scared the crap out of me. And I know it's going to scare you too. But I'm asking you to embrace the thought that failure is a habit. See, every time you fail, fewer options to fail remain, so eventually success will be the only option. Believe me, every single one of the concepts I've tried here, I've tested myself. I'm not telling you something that I'm just thinking about. I didn't make this up. I wrote down failure after failure. I have friends who can testify to them looking at me like, what is wrong with you? I'll take you back to a time in my book, as I was writing my book, I went back to a time in the military where I, as a leader, was failing military exercises over and over again. I mean, I was magnificently in trouble by their scale. But I had already set the stage for failure. And I had created an expectation of experimentation, and failure is part of that process. And so every time we failed in those military exercises, we got closer to what we had defined as success, but we were doing it the right way. We were learning the right habits. We were taking apart the things that were preventing us from truly succeeding the way we wanted to, and we were fouling it up and getting it wrong and falling on our face, but we were learning. And the learning was so amazing because we were free to fail. Now, I know there are certain parts of our life where we can't fail in the context of taking care of our families and doing things the right way. I get that. And I'm not saying just go fail everything. But what I am saying is when you're deliberately trying to succeed in a way that you define, you're going to have to experience success as a habit, or failure as a habit. And the failure you express, that you're learning, you're growing, you're changing, you're innovating, you're adapting, you're overcoming, and pretty soon, habitually, oh man, like the key to everything, you begin to figure out the best way to express your ikigai. You define success in ways that allow you to fail over and over again. And as a brazen creative, it's okay to fail along the way to succeeding. But you have to take the stigma away. You are not a failure. Your attempt did not come up with the solution you intended. Let me give it to you in brass tacks, real, no kidding. I told you we'd talk about Thomas Edison. Well, now's the time. This is the fun part of looking at failure. Thomas Edison created the light bulb. I mean, I'm being illuminated by them right now. This person had many, many patents in his life, but one of the most well-known is his patent for the light bulb, the filament in the light bulb. What most people don't know is it took him over 6,000 tries to get that right. He literally tried 6,000 filaments, the thing that goes in a light bulb, before he got the one that cast the right glow and lasted the right time. 6,000 attempts. Let me rephrase that. 6,000 failures before one success. But his one success changed the world. Now, he tested botanicals, cotton, bamboo, metals. He tested it all. And eventually he came up with what's called the carbon fiber filament. And that changed everything. One of his greatest quotes is, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Apply his lesson to your life. If success is the result of accumulated failures, and Edison knew that he would have to continue taking time, step by step by step, figuring out which one didn't work, which one didn't work, which one didn't work. Eventually, he found what did work. And he wasn't done with that one idea. Like, get this, his best light bulb design is still burning after 115 years. You can actually go online and Google the world's longest burning light bulb, and there's a camera on that light bulb today. 115 years old. One light bulb has continuously been in operation. So his 6,000 failures landed him one success, but that one success is one light bulb. That design lasted in one light bulb for 115 years and still going. There are others like it, some 80, some 100 years old. This is the oldest one is 115 years. Point being, are you going to quit just because you failed? Are you going to avoid failure because it marks you, the person, as a failure? Or are you going to take the time to see that failure is accumulated? Instead of being failure or success, it's failure and success, and that the one is in line with the other. And instead of saying, I hope I succeed, and I hope I don't fail, I will fail in order to succeed. Every time we make an attempt, we learn. If we succeed, we learn, and if we fail, we learn. And Tap the Gas Field, I promise you, I'll break this down so beautifully. It'll really bring home on a daily basis how you can modify your behavior and get to the success you seek, the success that expresses your ikigai, the success that you say you want because you have a burning desire by waking up every morning with your purpose on your heart and say, this I gotta do. Now let me get to it. This is not my first time trying to express this lesson. I failed before. My book happily sold a few hundred copies, but more importantly, it taught me how to fail properly. It taught me how to fail over and over again and succeed despite the failure. Succeed because of the failure. Succeed only because of the failure. Because I have experienced all the things I needed to learn. And sometimes a book does help, but most of the time I've got to learn it myself. Some say it's the hard way. Nah, I don't think so. I think it's the best way. The best way because when you're doing what you love to do, when you are finding a way to express your ikigai, then every failure is a chance to learn. Failure becomes a classroom, and those classrooms are so beautiful, they help us express ikigai by achieving the success we say we want. We define it, we achieve it. As with the other lessons, there'll be 5 reflection questions. Take your time and review them. These are going to be a little bit more complex. I'm intending that. I want you to understand that the complexity of these reflection questions is because we're so used to avoiding failure and calling it success. We have to break that. I know I had to. Remember my knots. I had a laundry list of knots, and I knew I was a success. I was confident I was a success. They said, why are you a success? I'm not a drug addict. Not. Pursue the positive, and you'll automatically avoid the negative. So when we get into these reflection questions, really slow down, digest them, take the time. Maybe go over this lesson again. Maybe you need to stop and yell at me because, what? Failure? I'm no failure. Wrestle with it. It's okay. I did. I had to wrestle with the thought that I was a miserable failure because I had avoided it for my whole life. I had to marinate on that for a minute. I'm asking you to do the same. So let's get these reflection questions going so you can really start the process of thinking. I look forward to your answers. I look forward to having a discussion. I know that once you get these reflection questions and you digest them and you start writing, you're going to want to share it. Go to the community of Brazen Creatives. You'll find it online and have fun with it. Share your stories, share your struggles, share your passion, and share what you've learned. Here are our 5 reflection questions. Take your time. Listen to them, write them down, think about them. Rate failure in your life. Use a scale from 1 to 5. 1 being you embraced failure like a best friend, and 5 meaning you avoid failure like an arch enemy. Where would you rate failure in sports? Your failure. Where do you rate failure in your career? Where do you rate failure in a relationship? Where do you rate failure as a parent or as a child? Where do you rate failure in your personal pursuits, like a hobby or a side business? In which of those areas do you best tolerate failure? And why that area? And if you know your ikigai, are you accepting failure in pursuit of its expression? Am I avoiding failure and calling that success? Who taught you to avoid failure? More importantly, why did they teach it to you? 3, are you afraid of failure? Or are you afraid to be a failure? Why did you answer the way you did? 4, is embracing failure hard? I'd like you to write down in your journal how it makes you feel to fail. And I want you to ask yourself why it's so hard to embrace failure as a habit. And if failure is easy for you, ask yourself, has it helped you become better? And if it has, or if you are embracing it, what led you to embrace failure so happily? 5, last question. Pick one important area in your life right now. How could you fail in it and use failure as a learning experience toward the success you seek? If you are in a no-fail environment for work, can you create a failure-rich environment elsewhere? And if you can't, if there's no way you can fail, not at work, not at home, not in any other endeavor, what stops you from failing? And if you can, write that stop down, the thing that prevents you from failing, and then go fail miserably. I know this is hard. I know how it felt for me to confront failure the way I'm asking you to confront it. And I know it's not an easy task, but I'm asking you, take the time as a brazen creative to embrace failure as a habit. In the next lesson, I'll teach you why this is so important. I'll see you soon.